Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Ari and Big Mike are proud to present the greatest podcast in the world. No snowflakes allowed, and summer is coming.
This is the podcast that was started by two guys on cigar night. So, Mike, why don't you tell us what you got for us today? You saw an article you had a little bit of trouble with, so let's see what we can do about going through it and seeing what it really means.
All right. So I read this crazy article about asking where the feminists are. So on October 7th, you got like thousands of people coming into Israel, murdering, raping, decapitating people, like all sorts of things like this, right? So as this is going on, I'm saying to myself, it's the worst day we've had in since the end of the Holocaust. And I'm reading this article, and this woman saying, well, where are the feminists? Where are they? Because, let me read this to you. It's much better if I read it to you. All right, because I don't want to get this wrong. All right. Following all these atrocities, women's rights activists abroad have been deathly silent, while others on social media have even had the audacity to deny the rape and other crimes against humanity that were committed by Hamas on October 7th, claiming that the condition of bodies and the time had passed until the women were identified prevented checking secretions. That's a major thing. Every time you do a rape kit, it has to be within 24 hours and before a shower, before going into water. So that's a big deal. UN Women, one of the most prominent women's rights organizations, released a statement on October 13th, almost a week after Hamas's massacre and abductions of the hostages, saying UN Women condemns the attack on civilians in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, which, mind you, they're not occupied, but we'll not even go there, but that's another story, and is deeply alarmed by the devastating impact on civilians, including women and girls. There is no mention of the grave atrocities like rape, beheading, and mutilation committed against Israeli women and girls on October 7th. And it's like, it just goes on. It is absolutely ridiculous when you know some of the stories. Like Hamas, literally, they videoed everything. They played it on social media. They played decapitations, rapes, all sorts of stuff. And yet the world doesn't condemn. Okay, so you don't condemn. You're anti-Semitic. I'll let it go. I'm used to it already. I'm just figuring out where I'm going to hide when you all come for me. Either that or I'm just going to grab a couple guns and just kill everybody who's trying to come after me. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just floored when I look at it. And I'm like, you're not for women's rights. What really are you for? Because if a woman is being raped right after her husband was killed, his body's right next to her, right? Her children are there, being murdered, being raped themselves, some of them, Where's the world's outcry? No. All they're screaming for is ceasefires. They're screaming for, how the Jews need to just, walk quietly into the showers. That's essentially what the world is saying to us.
And you're puzzled about the position of the feminist.
Yeah, listen, you want to know something? No, it's the lack of. Listen, forget the lack of. It is hypocritical for these organizations to claim that they care about women, and then when women are in need, they're simply not there to be found.
Well, hypocrisy is essentially inconsistency, right? What makes you think they would care about consistency? People who are on the far left.
Well, it's funny. We had this. You sent me this video we were talking about. What was her name again? Rachel Wilson.
Rachel Wilson. Yes.
She wrote this book. What was that? What was the name of the book again?
It's called Occult Feminism: The Secret History of Women's Liberation. And what she does is she gets the primary sources. She has read the books, she has read the articles that talk about the real goals of women's liberation since the very beginning, since the days of the Suffragettes, which have been made into such heroes by modern-day feminists. And when you really look at what they wrote, These women were complete fluffernutters.
Right. Well, the first thing that women, like, I'll tell you like this. I grew up with a mother who, when I was 12 years old, took me to a rally. You know, it was like, she was a pro-abortion rally run by the National Organization of Women in Washington, D.C. And we went and we marched for women's rights. This is the kind of upbringing that I had from her, you know, all throughout all this thing, right? At the same point that this is going on, she always used to talk about, you know, Women's Lib and, you know, all these organizations. And she said, you know what the problem is with women, with all these women's organizations?
What's that?
She's like, they lowered women to the ranks of men. And I never understood that as a child, like what she was talking about. And then I realized that if you look at every society in the world, there's a pecking order. There's ways on how we live. That so-called toxic masculinity, that every society has some sort of thing like that. You know, where it's like the man goes out to work. He is the hunter-gatherer. He is the guy who farms. He's the guy who does that. The women take care of the home and the children. And, like, there's nothing more important than a mother to the children. She's the one who teaches them about faith, about love, about care, about warmth, about living, about how to live a full life. You know, the man comes in and he doesn't do a lot of the emotional stuff. He does a lot of, like, the legality stuff. Let me teach you about the laws of the land. Let me teach you about how to farm, like all practical stuff. And there's a give and take between a couple where you see how you need both to have healthy people. Now, this woman, Rachel Wilson, one of the first things she talks about is getting rid of the man. That's what the feminist movement wants to do, which is increase single mothers, which is increased crime. You know, she gives a direct correlation between the two. She gives a direct correlation to how when you've taken away the masculinity of men and you put it into women, not only did you screw over men, but you also screwed over women. And she brings that up in this book, and you're like, wow. Like, you know, you hit the nail on the head. And we forget that when women are women and men are men, that's when we have the greatest, like, heterosexual relationships. You know, and I don't know. I went on a bit of a rant there. You go on.
There are two reasons, really, why you don't know exactly what the feminist movement is and has been since the beginning. And it's very simple. It starts with something called standpoint theory. Standpoint theory says that we should analyze the world through the standpoint of people who are and have been oppressed. And in the case of feminism, they make the claim that women have been oppressed as a group by men as a group since time immemorial. Be that as it may, what they say as a consequence is that we should tell the story of women's suffrage and women's rights through the perspective of the feminists. And what they did was they started hiding part of the real history. For example, most of the early feminists were, from the 19th century, and they had all of the hallmarks of 19th century craziness. For example, seances were very, very popular among a certain type of person in the 19th century, and most of these early feminists were seance attenders, dabblers in the occult, Eastern religions. They were very much, many of them were followers of Aleister Crowley and considered one of their...
Please tell the people who Aleister Crowley is.
Okay, I was going to get to that.
Right.
Aleister Crowley was one of the founders of Satanism. And a lot of the early feminists considered Lucifer to be one of their chief inspirations. And the reason people don't know this is, one, this stuff has been edited out of the textbooks. You can look through the decades at women's history books. And in the earlier ones, they just said it. But by the 1970s, these things were just taken out. The other reason you don't see it is because it's all hidden under a big, giant pile of boring. what's easier to do? Take someone's summary of it, or to read Susan B. Anthony's 4-volume history of women's rights? What's easier to do? To take someone's word for it, or to read what the suffragettes themselves wrote, or to read newspaper accounts of bombing attacks that were done by say, an English feminists, English suffragettes, who didn't care that 60% of English men were not qualified to vote, but they wanted upper class English women to have the vote. They couldn't care less about the men, for example, who did not get to vote whether or not their country went to war in 1914, but were sent into the trenches to get their guts torn out nevertheless. That's not what concerned them. Nor is it really told that women would have gotten the vote whether or not the suffragettes did their work anyway, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in World War I, women replaced men in the factories, and all of a sudden people said, you know something? They are contributing to society. They should have a say in how society is run. And these suffragettes, these heroes of feminism, their violent attacks made people say, wow, these women are completely nuts. Anti-suffrage among women was much, much more popular. We don't want to be associated with those nutcases. That's essentially how things were. And the suffragettes themselves most likely delayed getting the votes for women.
I hear that. You know, if you place yourself as a victim, right, which is what I think, that, you know, from what you're saying is how these suffrage women, you know, were, I understand the Satanism idea. I get it. It makes total sense. Who was Satan? Satan was an angel that was created by God, who then rebelled against God and tried to take over heaven, and then gets kicked out. He gets beaten. He gets, you know, it's like he's a victim himself in their eyes.
And he would rather rule in hell than serve in heaven.
Exactly. So now as we're looking at it, we're saying like, well, this is the mentality of it. This is this is that. You know, there's people who are real victims. You know, you look at a lot of people who've been raped, right? One of the things that you see about them is they gain weight, or they work out like a fiend, or they become, you know, like they'll go crazy into like boxing or MMA or something like that because they want to be able to defend themselves. Like each person has a different reaction, but there's an extreme reaction afterwards. You look at what you're just saying. There seems to be a lot of women with extreme reactions. Now, I'm not saying they were all raped. I'm saying that, like, there's something that happened there to give that kind of extreme reaction. I remember this one rabbi I used to talk to back in the day. He always told me over and over and over again, hurt people hurt people. So if somebody's angry with you, if someone's hurting you, you know, give them kindness because they're obviously in pain. And what you're saying about the right to vote, like, let's look at back to Congress. I mean, not Congress, the Constitution. So when the United States first happened, the only people who had the right to vote were landowners. That's it. And you had to be white and you had to be male. That's it. The white thing dropped off fairly quickly. You know, it dropped off very quickly because if you own land, you could vote. Well, guess what? Prior to the Civil War, there were black men who voted because they owned land. They would most of them would send a proxy, like, to vote for them, but it was like they still had the right to vote. Like, people don't know this part of history. Like, I remember I was watching this whole thing about it. If you're not a slave and you're a free man and you own land, you can vote. And I never heard of that before. It blew my mind. When I saw that, and I've listened to, on full disclosure, I have read articles and books that have denied that, and I have read articles and books that have backed it up.
Okay, but if you take history as all the things that ever happened, you would realize that history is about is too complicated for human beings to understand because so darn many things happen.
No. I'm going to give you history in a nutshell. The bad guys always lose. Remember, the good guys always win, right? Because they're the ones who write in history, so they're the good guys. I'm never going to portray myself. You think the Nazis thought they were bad? They thought they were doing good, right?
Hans, are we the baddies?
You know, to them we were. But America fought for freedom, liberty, and protecting the Jews, and yada, yada, yada. Like, it was a battle of good versus evil. So we're the good, they're the evil. To them, they were good, we were the evil.
Getting back to why the Western feminists were so silent on the issue of all these women being raped by the Hamas attack. Feminism simply is not what it says it's been. It is not what it's advertised to be. I remember hearing a summary of feminists in some propaganda source saying feminism is a notion that women are human beings too, and no one in history has ever denied that women are human beings. No one's ever denied that at all. But what it is it's a movement of social engineering trying to remake society. And if it serves the purpose of remaking society the way they envision it, then it's good. And if it's against their vision of remaking society, it's bad. Consistency doesn't matter. We saw with standpoint theory, the theory that objective truth is irrelevant compared to those quote-unquote truths that serve the revolution. There's a famous joke about political correctness. It started, I believe, in the Soviet Union, where they said about a certain the size of a certain harvest, but that's not correct, was the response. Oh, but it's politically correct. See, so the truths that serve politics and the truths that serve that are simply objectively true are two different things. And things like standpoint theory go to show that, to a certain mindset, the truths that serve politics are primary. And according to the modern day left, it is the Jews who are the oppressors and the Palestinians who are the oppressed. Therefore, we take the standpoint of the Palestinians. They are the victims, and whatever account casts them as the good guys is the account that is to be believed. So, of course, they're not going to believe or publicize the thousands of rapes that happened on October 7th. Of course they're not going to, because it doesn't serve the cause.
You have any final thoughts before we end this one today?
Yeah. What's the proper response when you hear, oh, well, it's not been proven enough that these rapes actually happened because of this or that or the other thing? They're almost theatrically skeptical of what happened. And you say, but wait a second. Didn't you say believe all women? Oh, I said that, believe all women for this other. And they'll always find a reason to justify it. There is no arguing with a standpoint like that. The only thing there is to do is mockery. When someone is going to theatrically refuse to believe things that are on video, refuse to believe things for which there is plenty of evidence, the only thing you could ever do is mock them and mock away.
I'm going to leave you all with a final thought. I was watching a couple videos like 2 days after, about October 9th. And I remember listening to like PV Talk, and I remember listening to a bunch of other Israelis talk and say, give their thoughts about what's going on, blah, 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 blah. And, the basic idea that I got from their talks, the world's behind us right now, but give us a week, and they're going to gaslight the shit out of us and tell us this didn't happen. And you know what? It's what's going on in the media right now. That's what's going on in the world. So, with that, I just want to say thank you all for listening. Y'all have a good day, good afternoon, and good night, and all the best. Just make sure to like and subscribe the videos, and I don't know. This one just took a lot out of me.
And my book, Just Power. I've got the author's proof copy. I got to change a few things, but it's going to be out pretty soon. But until then, Consent and Due Process are available on Amazon. They're also available as a audiobook for free on YouTube.
And remember, folks, Hanukkah is coming. Also Christmas.